Hi, welcome to my weekly newsletter of December 5th, 2024, by this expat English American, Kevin Thomas Morgan, who lives happily in America now. Today I'll consider the human pelvis, in which case let's get this out of the way up front. If you want to truly understand pelvic mechanics, don't waste your time with this newsletter. Read Understanding the Pelvis by Franklin and Wesley. Great book. Then do the exercises in the book, which will take a while, and watch how others move. Otherwise, bear with me as I provide a simple primer based on personal experience. I'm 81 and still competing in triathlons, for which I need a strong, flexible, healthy pelvis, thus my interest. How about you? As I considered suitable examples of pelvic movement, my first thought was of the famous Elvis the Pelvis, but a YouTube video failed to impress me. Then I thought, how about a belly dancer? What a difference. I chose to study a female subject because Franklin and Wesley said women tend to be more flexible than men. Belly dancers make distinctly circular movements with their hips, traveling along all three X, Y, and Z Euclidean coordinate planes. This movement is reminiscent of a double paddle stroke, with or without the J, in a kayak or canoe, where you have a paddle on each end of a single shaft. Compare this movement to that of the belly dancer pelvis. In the case of the belly dancer's pelvis and the kayaker's paddle, the core movement is a rotation spinning around a central fulcrum. For the kayaker, this fulcrum lies at the center of the paddle shaft. I'll come to the belly dancer's pelvic fulcrum in a minute. Here's an important quote from Franklin and Wesley's book, Understanding the Pelvis. The pelvic girdle needs to have movement to safely deal with the long levers it is associated with, the spine and the legs. Walking is a prime example. In this case, one leg is often forward, the other back, requiring the two pelvic halves to move opposite to each other. Let's start with a little anatomy just for fun, so we can understand this. The human pelvis consists of three large bones on each side, the ilium, ischium, and pubic bone. They are joined to form the innominate. The base of the spine, the sacrum, nestles between the large arms of the iliums, connected by the sacroiliac or SI joints. The pubic bones come together at the pubic symphysis. It's the flexibility of the distal spine, the SI joints, and the pubic symphysis which permits pelvic rotation and other movements. This remarkable piece of bony machinery is operated by powerful muscle groups, and there are many of them. Well, that briefly addresses the pelvic bones, about which you can't do a great deal except for weight training for strength and to offset osteoporosis as you age. Something you can do something about through training is the mass of muscles in and around the pelvis. This is where things become complicated, as you can see. You can find plenty of anatomical images on the internet if you would like to know more about these muscle groups. This is an area worthy of study, that's for sure. Knowledge of anatomy is helpful when dealing with physical issues as we age, when they come along, and along they will come, as I know. Here's a pelvic story from my life about the quadratus lumborum, or QL muscles. This is what Google AI had to say about these muscles. The quadratus lumborum, or QL, is a deep abdominal muscle that runs along the lower back from the lowest rib to the top of the pelvis. It plays a key role in stabilizing the pelvis and spine and is often a source of lower back pain. You can say that again. I sure found out. It happened when I woke up early one morning about to run a marathon years ago. I couldn't. As I attempted to move, the pain in my right lower back was excruciating. I had no idea why. Any movement created this crippling pain, but I badly needed to get to the restroom. It took me over an hour. I had to find a way to move, which I did eventually, by transferring the load away from my lower back and that QL muscle to my arms and shoulders. Later I concluded my QL pain was probably the result of a viral infection, as I knew Coxsackie viruses can cause both acute and chronic muscle inflammation, for instance. That's as far as my thinking went on the pathogenesis or cause of this problem. Fortunately, this workaround allowed me to move and slowly recover. Driving home that day was hell, but now I had a way to get in and out of my car and move around while reducing QL agony. Thus, my journey of pelvic discovery was underway. Let's move on to the hip flexors, the muscles we use to lift our knees, amongst other things. They play a constant role in my life for two major reasons. The first is related to my abdominal aortic aneurysm stent grafts, for which excessive hip flexion is to be avoided. I'll come to that in a minute. 20 years before finding that aneurysm, I damaged my right psoas muscle, the major hip flexor, and it still gives me trouble to this day. Maybe this is a good thing, as it reminds me to take care when lifting my knees. My problem started with overuse of a set of power cranks on a stationary bike. These cranks look odd because both pedals hang down when not in use. Power is transferred to the axle by some kind of clutch mechanism. You can't use the pedals on one side to help lift your knees on the other side. Doesn't sound like much, but it is. Clearly you have to have clip-in pedals for this to work. Normally, bike pedals are linked through the axle. As you push down with your quads on the right leg, it assists the ascent of the pedals on the left side, and vice versa. In fact, if you don't have clip-in pedals, your quads do most of the work on a bike. If you do have clip-ins, then you can optimize the use of all the muscles involved in turning the crank, which dramatically improves performance. The relative power of each of the muscle groups is made available by clip-in pedals, and power cranks crank that training up a lot. I worked with those power cranks for a year or so. At first I could only turn them for a few minutes before the pedals would make a clanking sound. My weak hip flexors were unable to satisfactorily lift the pedals over the top within a brief period of time, just a few minutes. After about a year, I could ride them for a couple of hours, no problem. But I thought I was indestructible. I guess I was young. One day, I did a hard 2-hour, 20-minute power crank ride. After climbing off the bike, I decided to do something really dumb. Go for a short run. Then I did something even dumber. I spotted a young friend, Andy, running by and came alongside at his pace to chat. This was faster than my normal pace, and within a minute I felt that right psoas muscle go. I probably tore it at the snapping area. I was crippled for a few days, and that muscle has never been the same since. Furthermore, I never climbed on those power cranks again. Over 20 years later, every morning as I get out of bed, that right psoas complains until I warm it up. On bad days, I have to get it to relax with a little lateral pressure from my thumb on the body of the muscle. Here's the trick taught me by Rebecca Amos Lawson, my body movement teacher, as follows. If you push gently at right angles to the length of the body of tight muscles, especially the psoas and similar kinds of muscles, with steady pressure, such muscles can often be encouraged to relax. They'll just let go. You can use your thumb or a tennis ball, but do so gently or you'll make things worse. This works differently for different muscles, as no two muscles react identically, nor do they react identically every day. Okay, that's it for bones and muscles. There's a lot more. How about everything else in the pelvis that could be useful to know about? The major blood vessels, for instance. They're shown in this diagram, red for the arteries and blue for the veins. My pelvic blood vessels turned out to be more than just interesting for me in 2010, 2017, and in 2020. They became life-threateningly interesting. Then there's the oft-forgotten loose connective tissue, the fascia. This was the best picture of pelvic fascia I could find on Shutterstock, where I purchase images and their copyright permissions. Fascia, or loose connective tissue, provides structural support everywhere in our bodies. It holds us together, being made of extracellular matrix, manufactured by fibrocytes, and the slippery hyaluronic acid made by fasciocytes for lubrication, which allows everything to move around smoothly. Other than in the rest of our body, in the brain, astrocytes do much of the structural support work. If you want to know more about fascia and how it holds us together, I recommend you read Anatomy Trains by Tom Myers. Great book, great work. That's not all there is to our pelvis, as we have lymphatics, certain components of the autonomic nervous system, the reproductive tract, and so forth. I'm currently weaving this information and much more into a little book entitled Pelvic Alignment Hip to Heel. It's number 6 in my Inspirational Self-Help book series. But it's quite a challenge. Complex topic, but important. One final note on my obsessive interest in my pelvis. In there, in my case, lies a large aortic aneurysm, 6.9 centimeters in diameter. It was found in 2010, and it's now held together by 4 interlocking stents. In order to protect those stents, and thus my life from internal hemorrhage, I have to take care not to make a wrong move with my pelvis. These stents have been holding me together since 2010, which is amazing. You may wonder what I do to reduce risk of dislocating those stents. Well, I reduce hip flexion on the bike by no longer using aero bars. That's a pain because it really helps in a headwind. Furthermore, based on my pelvic anatomy, I no longer do pigeon pose on the left side, which is used to stretch the hip rotators, especially the piriformis, as this would risk disconnecting the stent in my left internal iliac artery from the stent in my left common iliac artery. So a little knowledge of anatomy certainly comes in handy, in my case at least. Okay, that's it for those things, and now we move on to a topic that interested me for a while. Remember the value of anatomy when you encounter injection-happy, pill-obsessed physicians. I suffered a terrible heel pain years ago. The doctor said it was plantar fasciitis and I would need a heel injection. I strongly disagree with that idea, simply on the basis of the underlying structure of the human heel. I subsequently made a study of this idiopathic heel pain. Idiopathic is a lovely fancy word. It means we haven't a clue what is going on, so it covers our ignorance. That's how language can be a useful tool to confuse the unwary. For instance, the Tsars of Russia spoke French to hide their plans from their servants. Intellectual communities play the same tricks today. I came to the conclusion that I was suffering from a referred nociceptive pain, the perception of which is referred to the heel from the pelvic hip rotator muscles. You can find that story on my website, Inspirational Self-Help Books, if you so desire. By the way, if you know a neurology graduate student or postdoc looking for a great research project, this is certainly one such area of importance and interest where a great deal of unnecessary human pain is involved. So that's it for my random thoughts on the human pelvis. Have fun, as life is too wonderful to miss. And by the way, if you want to live a long time, exercise is the real key. Lots of exercise. And keep moving those hips.